The first warning sign wasn't the shouting, it was the splash. At 6:42 a.m., the sun was just beginning to bleed a dull, bruised orange over the horizon. I was standing in my kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee cutting through the morning stillness when I heard it. A heavy rhythmic disturbance of water that didn't belong in the silence of my backyard. I didn't rush. I've spent 20 years on construction sites. You learn quickly that the man who panics is the man who makes mistakes. I set my mug down, walked to the back slider, and looked out. There she was, Karen, the HOA president, the self-appointed queen of a kingdom I didn't even belong to. She was standing inside my gated pool area, her designer sunglasses perched on her head like a plastic crown, her phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. She was screaming into the receiver with a practiced, theatrical desperation. Yes, send the officers immediately. He's denying community access. It's a safety hazard and he's being hostile. She pointed a trembling finger at my house as if she were identifying a gunman in a lineup. The absurdity of it was almost poetic. She had climbed a 6-foot cedar fence, bypassed a heavy-duty deadbolt, and was currently attempting to usher 3 of her neighborhood disciples through my side gate. They stood on the other side, looking hesitant, clutching towels and pool noodles like they were storming the beaches of Normandy. What Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend in her fit of delusional entitlement, was that I document everything. As she screamed at the dispatcher, I reached into my pocket and opened the feed on my phone. Crystal clear 4K footage, audio that picked up every screech, every property line violation, every illegal entry, and every single lie she was currently spinning into the official record. I watched her for a moment through the glass, her face turning a vibrant, unhealthy shade of magenta. I wasn't angry, I was curious. I wanted to see exactly how far she would go before reality hit her like a ton of wet concrete. I'm a contractor by trade. My hands are calloused, my back is a map of old injuries, and my patience is a fortress. I bought this property with cash, every dollar earned from 18-hour shifts and weekend side jobs. I didn't buy into a lifestyle. I didn't buy into a committee. I bought silence. I bought the right to exist without someone else's thumb on my scale. The pool was my first project. It had been a cracked, sun-bleached ruin when I moved in. I spent months chiseling away the old plaster, laying new tile, and sweat steaming the plumbing. It was my cathedral of quiet. I met Karen during my 3rd week. I was unloading lumber from my truck when the sharp, aggressive clack-clack-clack of heels hit the gravel. She didn't offer a name or a welcome. She just marched up to me, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, and said, "You'll need to schedule an official inspection before making structural changes to an HOA-adjacent lot." I remember looking at her, a 2x6 balanced on my shoulder, dust coating my brow, and just blinking. "I'm not in the HOA," I said, my voice low and level. She tilted her head, that brittle, condescending smile stretching across her face. "Oh, we'll see about that. Maps can be outdated. We're discussing annexing this side of the block. It's just a matter of time." That should have been my warning. Most people see a boundary. Karen saw a challenge. Over the next month, the compliance notices began. They were tucked under my windshield wipers, taped to my gate, and mailed in thick, official-looking envelopes. My fence was too high, my work truck was unsightly, my shed was an unauthorized outbuilding. It was a psychological war of attrition. She was trying to build a narrative of my defiance before she ever made her move. She began slandering me in the neighborhood group chats. I know because a guy named Mark, who lived 3 houses down and hated the drama as much as I did, sent me the screenshots. Karen was telling the neighborhood I was unstable. She told parents I was storing hazardous, unregulated chemicals in my pool. I watched through my windows as neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street when they saw me. She had turned my sanctuary into a goldfish bowl, and she was the one tapping on the glass. The escalation peaked 2 nights before the splash. My security cameras caught her at 3:00 a.m. creeping along my fence line with a flashlight, sniffing the air like a bloodhound, trying to find proof of the imaginary chemicals she'd told everyone about. She looked possessed. There is nothing more dangerous than a person who has convinced themselves that their nosy whims are actually a moral crusade. Which brings us back to the morning of the 24th. I stepped out onto the patio. The air was cool, but the tension was boiling. Karen saw me and didn't flinch. If anything, she stood taller, bolstered by the audience of towel-clad neighbors huddled at my gate. "You're trespassing, Karen," I said, leaning against the doorframe. I kept my voice conversational, almost bored. "And you're leading a group of people into a private residence without a permit or an invitation. That's a bold strategy." "This pool is a community asset," she shrieked. "I've checked the original plat maps from 1974. This land was designated for communal recreation. You're illegally withholding a resource from the families of this neighborhood." I didn't argue. I didn't tell her the 1974 maps were superseded by a 1988 zoning change that grandfathered this lot out of the development. I didn't tell her I had a signed, notarized letter from the county assessor confirming my exemption. I just checked my watch. 2 minutes later, two squad cars pulled into my gravel driveway. The sirens were off, but the lights were casting rhythmic flashes of red and blue against my house. Karen's eyes lit up. This was her moment. Her justice had arrived. She ran toward the officers as they stepped out, her heels catching in the grass I'd painstakingly leveled. "Officers, thank God, he's been threatening us. He's refused to let the children use the facility and he's been hostile to the board. I want him removed. I'm the HOA president and I'm authorizing his removal from the premises." The lead officer, a veteran with a face like a stone wall, looked at her. Then he looked at the neighbors clutching their pool noodles. Finally, he looked at me. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I just held up my phone. "Officer," I said, "the woman currently screaming at you broke into my gated property at 6:40 a.m. She is currently trespassing, as are the people behind her. I have high-definition footage of her climbing that fence, and I have the audio of her lying to your dispatcher about a threat that never happened." Karen's face went from magenta to a ghostly, translucent white. I have the maps, I have the authority." "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice dropping into that dangerously calm tone cops use right before things get real. "Step away from the gentleman's pool. Now." "But now." The neighbors at the gate began to melt away, suddenly realizing that Community Pool Day was actually Criminal Trespass Day. Karen stood alone on my pool deck, her clipboard trembling in her hand. I walked over to the officer and handed him a folder I'd kept on the kitchen counter for this exact occasion. It contained the survey, the title deed, the zoning exemption, and a printed log of every violation notice Karen had illegally issued me. "There's one more thing," I said, looking Karen dead in the eye. For the first time, I let a small, sharp smile touch my face. "I'm a contractor. I know the local codes better than she knows her own husband's name. Last week, I took the liberty of looking up the HOA's actual common area clubhouse, the one Karen has been neglecting while she obsessed over my backyard." Karen's eyes widened. "Officer," I continued, "the community clubhouse has a massive black mold infestation in the crawlspace, unpermitted electrical work in the kitchen, and a structural crack in the foundation that makes it legally uninhabitable. I've already sent the photos and the report to the city building inspector. They're probably pulling the HOA's certificate of occupancy right about now." The silence that followed was heavy. The only sound was the hum of my pool filter, perfectly maintained, perfectly legal. Karen looked like she was trying to speak, but her throat had seemingly closed up. She had spent months trying to annex my peace, only to end up losing her own kingdom. She wasn't just a Karen anymore, she was a liability. The board would move to impeach her by sunset to avoid the lawsuits I was clearly prepared to file. The officers escorted her off my property. She didn't march this time. She shuffled, her heels kicking up dust, her clipboard looking like a heavy, useless piece of trash. As the squad cars pulled away, I stood on my porch and took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. It was still hot. The neighborhood was quiet again, really quiet this time. No whispers, no glares, just the sound of a world that had finally learned where the line was drawn. "I think tomorrow I'll put up a sign, nothing flashy, just a simple, clean piece of wood that says, 'Private property, keep out.' Though somehow I don't think I'll need it.